What if the man building bombs for Al-Qaeda was also working for MI6? This is not fiction. This is the story of Aimen Dean, a young Saudi who joined jihad in Bosnia at the age of 15, trained in Al-Qaeda's camps, swore allegiance to Osama bin Laden, and for nearly a decade he would walk a line no one else could, working in Al-Qaeda, answering to MI6. Aimen Dean was born in Saudi Arabia in 1978. He was not poor, he was not desperate. He grew up in a religious middle-class household with solid education, but his mindset was shaped by war and politics. He experienced the world around him burning. Bosnia's Sarajevo was shelled at point-blank range. Serb militias drove Muslims from their homes, rounding them up by the thousands, burying them in mass graves. In Chechnya, entire cities like Grozny were flattened. Russian forces bombarded civilians indiscriminately, hospitals, schools, markets, all targets in a counter-terrorist campaign disguised as state security. He was angry, to say the least, angry that Muslim lives were so cheap, that no one was stopping the onslaught. He was just 15 when he left home for Bosnia and arrived during the height of the war. He soon joined a militant unit of foreign fighters called the Mujahideen. Many had seen combat in Afghanistan and brought with them hardened doctrine, experience, and deadly discipline. Aimen saw the war up close. He saw limbs blown off, people bathed in blood. But instead of pulling away, he leaned in. For a young man in search of an identity, Bosnia gave him clarity. The West was the enemy, and jihad was the answer. After Bosnia, he went back to the Gulf, but it didn't last. He couldn't shake off the adrenaline or the ideology. By the time he was 17, he had made his way to Afghanistan. That is where things started to change. In Afghanistan, Aimen entered the world of Al-Qaeda. The group had already transformed from a loose network of Afghan war veterans to something more ambitious, a global jihadist vanguard. Their camps were efficient, their instructors were experienced, and the ideas they spread were absolute and compelling. The moment Aimen arrived, the top leadership saw him as very useful. He had religious knowledge, combat experience from Bosnia, and the perfect combination of determination and clarity. That was rare, because most recruits were either fighters or thinkers, not both. He was trained to build bombs from scratch, using commercial chemicals or whatever was available. Then came deployment strategy, how to hide devices, how to detonate them remotely, and how to move between locations without getting caught. During this time, he met key figures, the ones who didn't speak publicly, the ones who didn't use real names and didn't appear in photos. Some of them were close to even bin Laden, bodyguards, couriers, commanders. Within a year and a half, he met the grand leader Osama bin Laden himself. He was trusted, and in the world of jihad, that's everything. By 1997, Dean was on active operations. One mission involved rudimentary chemical weapons, basic toxin formulas using cyanide and botulinum. They didn't trust scientists or labs, they trusted the men on the ground. So Dean and others mixed compounds in dark rooms. They tested on animals, goats typically, spreading gas in makeshift chambers. But inside this high-stakes reality, Aimen started to see fractures. He watched trusted brothers brutalize fellow Muslims. He saw abuse covered with theological justification. He witnessed internal power plays masked as piety. Some were vying for influence, others for money. And then came the turning point. Dean was working near a poorly sealed container. His mask did not fit right. The gas leaked. Within seconds, he was down, convulsing, struggling to breathe. They rushed him to the field hospital. He barely survived. For days, he lay in bed. What he had now was just silence, pain, and a whole lot of questions. If you liked the story, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. We've got more stories coming. It's early 1998. Al-Qaeda's senior leadership met to finalize what they had already been hinting at for months. An attack that would directly confront the United States to avenge the deployment of US troops in Saudi Arabia after the Gulf War, something they viewed as a violation of the sacred land. Nairobi and Dar es Salaam, both cities had US embassies, which were lightly guarded compared to the high-profile sites in Europe or the Middle East, and both represented what Al-Qaeda saw as extensions of America's political and military reach across Africa and beyond. August 7, 1998. The day was chosen to mark the anniversary of US troops arriving in Saudi Arabia. At 10:30 a.m. in Nairobi, a delivery truck approached the rear parking gate of the US Embassy. Inside was a bomb weighing nearly 2,000 pounds. When it detonated, the force tore through concrete and steel. A nearby office block collapsed instantly. The embassy itself just buckled. Less than 10 minutes later, Dar es Salaam was hit. The second truck bomb went off just outside the embassy walls, inflicting similar devastation. Over 220 people were killed in the two attacks. Most of the people had no connection to the US government. They were Kenyan and Tanzanian workers, pedestrians and drivers, bus passengers, and little kids. The FBI arrived on the scene quickly. So did intelligence agencies from multiple countries. Within weeks, investigators traced the operation back to key Al-Qaeda members, including planners with links to Sudan and Afghanistan. The East Africa cell was exposed. Operatives were detained in Nairobi, Dar es Salaam, and later even in Germany. For Aimen Dean, who had trained in the same networks, it hit differently. Civilian deaths, children getting killed, hundreds of innocent lives. This is not what Aimen had signed up for. Shortly after, he disappeared from Afghanistan altogether. Next thing, he walked into a government building in London and told them everything. He laid out the entire structure. He explained how the cells moved, described who held which role. He shared operational details, technical skills, and insight into a world that the Western intelligence couldn't penetrate on its own. The MI6 didn't waste time. They saw what he offered, but they didn't just want intel. They wanted access, a presence on the inside. So they made him an offer. Go back as an asset. Aimen Dean re-entered the scene, this time under MI6's direction. The goal was to pass on details without getting caught. And it worked. For 8 years, Aimen Dean remained embedded. He moved between London, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia. He tracked money transfers, operational planning, safe houses. His biggest achievement was disrupting a major Al-Qaeda plot to bomb US embassies in Southeast Asia. It would have mirrored the East Africa bombings, but his tip shut it down. He also helped stop a wave of attacks targeting US naval assets, the kind of plots that don't make headlines because they never happened, but they would have if it weren't for him. MI6 called him a gold mine, and so did the CIA, but the pressure was relentless. He was not hiding in a bunker. He was out there, face to face with the militants. One little slip, and he would be gone. To his surprise, in July 2005, London was struck. 4 coordinated suicide bombings on public transport during rush hour killed 52 people and wounded hundreds more. Aimen was not involved, but it rocked him. The attack forced him to look harder at the system he was part of, not just Al-Qaeda, but MI6 as well. He was passing intelligence, he was inside the networks, but attacks were still happening. Was the intelligence acted on fast enough? Were policymakers even listening? At the same time, his name started circulating in circles where names weren't supposed to. One of his own men had been captured in Pakistan. Another had vanished after crossing into Iran. Dean started to sense something going wrong. By 2007, the danger became official. The United States planned to release legal filings related to detainees at Guantanamo Bay. Buried in the documentation were references to operations that he had reported on, details that would connect the dots for anyone looking closely enough. If that became public, his life would be at risk. So MI6 pulled him out just in time. But his cover was blown eventually when an American journalist, Ron Suskind, published his book about US foreign policy after 9/11. The book contained enough information to identify Aimen, and that is exactly what happened. Al-Qaeda issued a fatwa calling for his death. Aimen Dean had to run for his life. He went dark, changed locations, changed roles. Eventually, he resurfaced as a speaker and security consultant. Today, he speaks out against extremism and tries to educate people on how radicalization happens and how it can be stopped. He's one of the few people alive who's been inside both worlds.